Okay. So, Dean, if you want to catch the front lights, I think we're going to start out going through some pictures that.
You want to hear the report these two have?
Oh yeah, we could. Yeah. So you guys both made it out to Dean. So tell us what you saw, what you did, and what you learned, or what you thought.
Well, opened up, we got into 2 hives, pulled frames out, took the boxes out, got to find out how heavy they were.
Yeah,
We used the
heavier than you thought.
equipment, we used the tools and put on our beekeeping gear and
Found the
Bee
queens.
buzzing
found the
all time.
queens. Yeah, buzzing all the time. And
So did the frames come out as easy as they do on the box out there?
no,
No, that's what the tool is for. You probably figured out
Yeah.
pretty quick.
they were sticky or tight. And
Sometimes they are really tight. Yeah.
yeah. And we went through after that how to assemble or how to put in your, if you get a nuke or if you get a package.
Mhm.
We kind of went through both of those scenarios.
Cool.
What else?
So you both get to pull a frame out and
Yes.
get a good look at it.
Yes.
Did you get stung?
No.
Nobody got stung.
But after we took off our stuff, there's literally a bee like right here. And I was like, what am I supposed to do? And Dean was like, well, what's it doing? He's like, so what? It's flying around you.
Can you get that muted?
Switch over to,
There you go. Oh, still wasn't.
Screen still has not come up. The Zoom screen.
Really?
That's why I couldn't control it.
Oh, that is weird. I show you here. So I find that when people first get to actually hold a frame with real bees on it and look at it, that's when things start to click. You can see a lot of pictures and we can show you things on a hive that, a frame that doesn't really have bees on it, but for some reason it's really being in the real world looking at it that things start to make a little more sense. So, yeah. All right, so let's see if I can make these as big as possible. Okay, so this was shortly after Dave got a 5-frame nuke and had put them in a 10-frame box. He went through and took pictures of both sides of every frame. And somehow or another, the pictures got a little bit out of order, but I think we can kind of figure it out. And there were a couple of frames that they didn't even work on, so they're just foundation. There's like 7 or 8 frames in here. So we'll just go through them a little bit. After reading the text for this week, we talk about inspecting a colony, and these are the frames that you're looking at when you inspect a colony. So this one might be a little bit blurry, but can you see there's a little bit of open brood right there in the center? A little bit of capped honey out there towards the end. So what do you see on that one?
lots of capped brood.
Lots of capped brood. Yep. A little bit of maybe emerged or open. I think there's some pollen there. So we saw some pictures earlier of, a solid frame of capped brood, like all of the bees were off of it. But we started to talk about at that time how the queen starts laying in the center and spirals her way out. And she's also spiraling her way out to the outer frames. So you end up with like this football shaped patch of brood in the center of the hive. And then since she started in the center, the first ones that hatch are in the center. So here's the beginning of that other pattern you start to see. This frame was at one time all solid capped brood. Now it's hatched or emerged rather in the center. And I don't know if we'll see it here, but at times you get to where there's just a ring on the outside of capped brood and then a circle in the center of white larvae and then eggs in the middle. So it just kind of keeps repeating that pattern. What are we looking at there?
Drones,
Mhm.
future drones.
Yep, so these bigger ones are drone brood.
So does that bullet get taken down after the drone's out, or do they leave it to
I
make
think
more
it-
drones?
I think it depends on the size of the cell underneath it. So sometimes when a queen starts to go bad, she'll lay what she thinks is fertilized eggs in worker cells, but they're unfertilized, so they start developing into drones. That's when you really see the bullets,
Okay.
because and the cell is the worker size. These, they kind of look to me like they're in a spot where the
Yeah.
comb is a little goofy, and I think they're drone size, they're bigger size.
Okay.
But yeah, that would be the difference. Yeah, if a drone developed in a worker cell when they're done, I think they tear it back down and
Okay.
use it as a worker cell again. Does that work? Yeah. All right, a little bit blurry in spots, but what do we see here?
There's a lot of larvae and some capped, so it's very early on to be, what, 21st day, 20th day, probably?
Sure, yep,
Yeah.
yep, lots of older larvae and a little bit of capped in the center. So there again, there's that pattern.
Like the really dark ones are the, how do you know? Like, what are you looking at?
Well,
Sure.
the C shape with the white, the shiny C's are larvae, and they'll eventually turn into capped.
Okay, yeah, I see.
So,
What you're now I see it.
And see how they fill the whole cell?
Yeah, I see it now.
Yeah,
I just wasn't seeing it.
no problem. And then that's the capped brood.
Mhm.
So, that's that same pattern. There's a little spot of capped brood in the center, and then it's getting younger the further you go out. You can't see it, but you get out here and there's probably eggs. All right, what's different about that frame? Can you tell from the picture?
Just drawing that foundation on that one.
Yep, that's a new frame that was foundation and they just started to draw it out, or it isn't all the way out yet even. What's up in the top left corner? In there. That's open nectar. So they're turning it into honey. It's not honey yet. So
When's it honey after they cover it?
once they cap it,
Cap
yeah,
it?
yep. So this one, like if you look down in here, I don't think there's anything in it. And it's kind of, depends on circumstances. They might draw this out and put nectar in the whole thing. Or they may do the normal pattern, and because the nectar's already started up here in the corner, and the queen might be laying in the center. So sometimes you can pull a new frame out like this and kind of tell where they're headed. Like if they had one of these frames all full of nectar right alongside of the brood nest in the hive that I put a nuke in, I might move an empty foundation frame against that brood nest and hope that the queen would start laying in it instead of them filling it with nectar. Okay, lots of capped brood on that one, and then the center, it's emerged, and maybe there's eggs in there if we could see that close. Pretty much same thing there. There's pollen in this one. So at one time it had a band of pollen going through here, and the queen skipped over that pollen and laid eggs all the way up to the top bar. So they were pretty packed with brood at one point for her to do that. All right, tell me what you see on that one.
That pattern you were talking about, the center's hatched out, or
Yep.
might be new stuff going in. Hard to tell.
Yep.
Honey out in the corners.
Right, honey out there, yep, in there. And you see this band right through here in between the honey and the brood. It's again here. There's a little bit of pollen in this one. So, that band is a lot of times where you look, usually where there's young larvae or eggs. This one also a little bit in that center because of the way it's going through that cycle. So that's just a little bit zoomed in there. You can see larvae, a couple of capped brood cells here and there, lots of bees. Okay, brood in the center, larvae and eggs on the outer circle. That one again, she's laid all the way up to the top bar. So this nuke, when he got it in the 5-frame nuke box, it was about to start running out of room. This is pretty full. Now it's in a 10-frame box and they've got the space, but you can tell this was a really good nuke. This was really time to get it moved.
Now, would you be concerned about all those empty spots up there, like we talked about spotted brood?
Like up there?
About the missing ones in the middle.
Not enough missing
Yeah.
ones in the middle to be concerned, I don't
Right.
think.
That would be my thought, I guess.
Right. And as far as the ones missing here, that's that transition area from brood to larva to eggs. You know, right in there, you're going to find larva, and the further out you go, eggs. All right, what are we seeing in this frame?
Lots of larvae.
Where's that nectar?
That's nectar.
Just
Oh,
reflecting,
is that what that is?
sunlight
Yeah.
reflected off the little
Yep.
drops.
So I see every cell's got a little bit of a highlight, and it's one of those things that again, it's a lot easier to tell in person than it is on a picture, like
Well,
the
even
yellow
in
cast.
person, it's tricky to see because I see that shiny stuff, and is that royal jelly and a little tiny larva in there, or is that nectar? Or not that it really matters, but it's just something that you're gonna see.
Yeah. Sometimes it is even with the naked eye hard to tell. You got to get the sun right, and I find that larva, there's a variation to it, and nectar, every cell tends to reflect almost the same way. So that's kind of
Does it spill out or is it staying pretty well?
it can. It depends. So some people will tell you if you take a frame and tip it and shake it and nectar falls out, that means the flow is on. That they're bringing it in so fast that it's really liquid in there. I don't know how true that is, but I know at times you can just tip it and some will drip out, or you bump it or something. And I think that the closer it gets to honey, the more they've dehydrated it and got the moisture content down, the less likely it is that any would fall out.
And even with that, I don't know as if you'd shake any larva out, not that I've ever seen, you know, you could give it a little
What did I say,
shake
larva?
and you might have watery nectar come out, but I don't think I've ever seen larva fall out of the.
No.
They're stuck in there pretty well.
No, I've never seen larvae fall out.
The other message right now is there's no need to hurry when you're looking at your frame.
Yeah.
Take your time, and people tend to get real, I'm guilty of it, as bad as anybody else. You can really learn a lot by studying and taking notes, keeping
And
notes.
it's in the text, and I know I've mentioned it, but don't be afraid to move the bees out of the way so you can see what's going on too.
Just either touch them on the back gently or breathe on them and they'll move.
Yeah, if you blow on them, they'll typically move.
And once again, that depends on the weather and stuff too, when you're doing your inspection. Like
True.
Sunday, it was nice and calm and sunny, just ideal, you know. Today, the wind's blowing pretty good, makes it a lot tougher.
They're not gonna be happy today. No.
Yeah.
Or if it's raining. If it's raining and misty, don't even bother,
Yeah,
because they'll be really feisty then.
especially right before a thunderstorm rolls
Yep.
in. They'll know it before you will, but they'll let you know now's not a good time. Anybody have a guess what that is?
Is that moth?
Wax moths.
Yeah.
Yep, that's the the aftermath of wax moths. So they leave like a webby stuff all the way in between the frames, and they'll chew on the wood. I don't see any evidence of that in this picture, but yeah, that's wax moths.
There's a question that should be answered there
On this frame or on the wax moth
on the
frame?
last one.
I skipped a frame. I skipped a couple frames.
And you reuse that frame.
Freeze it, maybe.
I think there's a little bit of beekeeper preference, but I don't think that one's bad enough that I'd throw it away. Depends. If I didn't really need it too bad, I might throw that away. If I had a good strong hive and it was a newer frame, I think that could be reused. They will clean it up.
The issue, yeah, for me, I've got hundreds of frames now, and the problem is that this is fairly clean because it was relatively new. It was neglected at the first winter. Usually there's a lot more crap along the bottom, and the foundation is really glued in there. When that starts to happen and it's all propolis, it's really difficult to get that foundation out of there and clean up the frame to where it's really usable. Don't you find that, Dean?
Yeah.
I mean, it's really a toss-up. You just have to put your blinders on and pitch it sometimes because
Yeah.
it's really a mess, and then you don't trust your instincts as to whether that was diseased or not, or how bad is that.
Yeah.
But and then there's the job of cleaning up the frame directly. So
Sinuses decided to stuff up last night. I've been fighting them today, so I apologize. Yeah, with this just being wax moth damage, I mean, you're not, if you froze it especially, or if it froze over the winter, the eggs are dead. Freezing them for more than 72 hours kills the eggs. So you're not going to spread the wax moths by reusing it. And wax moths aren't a disease, or they don't go hand in hand with the disease that you'd be passing along. I wouldn't put this on a weak hive necessarily, because it might be more effort than what they could take for cleaning it up. But a good strong colony could probably clean that up pretty good. If
I
you're
wouldn't
looking,
put it in there like that. I would scrape that wax off there.
I don't know if I'd scrape the wax off or
Really?
not.
I just brush off all the webbing that I could.
Yeah.
You know, there's some really deteriorated spots, but like through the center there, that looks fine.
Yeah, the center frames look pretty good. Over here, maybe some of the cells are distorted, and yeah, I might scrape some of that off. Yeah.
So if you're scraping it all off and you distort the cell shape, will they fix it?
Yeah.
Straighten it all out.
The
So-
foundation establishes the shelf.
But if you didn't scoop it all the way down there and you were
Oh,
mashing it over and
they'll
stuff,
clean that
they'll
up.
they'll fix it.
That, no.
Yep, and that hard plastic in the center still has that hexagon shape.
They're
and
really good
they'll get
engineers
back
on
to
that
it.
point, yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, so what is on that frame?
That must be nectar.
That's nectar. So you see how it's a darker frame. So it's obviously been a brood frame at one point. So we've already set or established this came from a 5-frame nuke, and it's been in a 10-frame box for a couple weeks. If you pulled this frame out of the center of a brood nest and you see this much nectar in the brood nest, you're headed towards swarming, because normally they would only raise brood in this, but if they start to run out of space, they'll put nectar in the brood nest.
See the new frames down there? There was not enough built-up comb for them to store that nectar.
So in this situation, if it was warm, I'm thinking like 60 degrees at night, I might at this point take one of these unused frames and move it in between this frame and the brood nest, because they'll start drawing it out. The queen will start laying in it, as opposed to she can't lay in that one because they started filling it up with nectar.
It probably was late in putting another box on top of this. Probably is not a honey super on
I
this.
wouldn't think so, because there aren't any pictures of 3 or 4 of these 10 frames, so I'm assuming they were all just foundation.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, Another good frame of brood. What's that? That's another frame of foundation that they're just starting to work on. So we kind of worked our way through to the other end. All right, so
It's a nice thrill too, when you see that for the first time after you put a bare foundation frame in there and you come in there and then they've started to build it out in
yeah.
good shape like that. Okay, I did that part right.
Okay, we'll go through the normal, abnormal real quick. I did this last time too. I forgot to share my screen. I can't find the little control to close that. There it is. So now you've seen pretty much normal frames going all the way through Dave's hive there. So you've seen a little more normal. Maybe some of these abnormal ones will be easier to spot. This one again, I think is pretty obvious. So that is chalk brood mummies. And we'll just start going. So Rick, normal or abnormal?
Something going on in that center one, I think.
Okay. So it's normal. Are you talking about this one?
Yeah.
You know, it looks like the larva's a little off center, but not, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I mean, you'll see that occasionally. Sometimes that's, again, the camera. Because, you know, when you're looking straight down in the cells with the camera, the lens kind of distorts things a little bit. So you're not always seeing straight down because only a couple of them are directly below the lens. But yeah, I see what you're saying there. That looks a little
Like
different, but it's,
haze or something.
yeah,
Looks like.
I think that's royal jelly up there. And yeah, it is a little different than what you normally see. No, it's overall a normal frame. Amy, normal or abnormal?
Abnormal.
Yep. So that's European foul brood. Some of the keys are like this one is twisted weird. That one's twisted weird. Those are really, really brown. Cappings aren't too much of an indication on this one, but they are starting to sink a little bit. Kyle?
I'll say normal.
Yep. Yep, that's a normal. And then this one kind of points out that interface that we talked about where that's where you're going to see a lot of the young larvae. They're there. It's kind of hard to see in this picture. And then as you get up towards the pollen and the honey, you're going to see more eggs. So it's an area you want to pay attention to. Rick?
That looks normal.
Yep. Let's see. No, that one is chalk brood. Yep, that one is chalk brood. See how they're down at the bottom of the cells, not I'm trying to say how to. They're not curled up at the bottom of the cell. They've elongated into the cell and then kind of melted. They're kind of melted and they're discolored a little bit. Amy?
Normal.
Yep, normal. And that's one of those really, really good frames of brood. That's just wall-to-wall brood, cap brood. Kyle?
That's normal.
Normal depending on the circumstances, right? Because it's a queen cell. It's a capped queen cell.
That isn't at the bottom.
Yeah, that one looks like it's
Up a ways.
a supersedure or an emergency cell. Yep, it's kind of on the edge of where there were cap brood. Yeah. Rick?
That's normal. It's just drone cells.
Drone cells out there in the corner. Absolutely. Yep. Amy?
Normal?
Normal. And this is another one of those where the picture is really yellow. It's just a light cast.
That where darker foundation is nice for brood, so you can see them
Yeah,
better.
black
when they
foundation
don't-
makes eggs easier to see. Yep. This is a good picture other than the color cast, because you've got some really healthy looking cappings, some really big larvae. And then as you work your way out, look how they get younger and younger and younger. And then you start seeing eggs. So really, the picture has a lot, but yeah, the color cast on it is.
You can see on the cappings, you know, the fresher cap ones are more that lighter tan or yellow. And as they're older cap larvae, the cappings seem to get darker.
Get darker. And the cells too. Like I would say this is a pretty recently drawn out frame of foundation, because even in the cells aren't dark yet. The older the wax is, the darker it gets. Kyle, is it your turn?
Yep. Abnormal.
Yeah. So spotty brood pattern. I'm not sure which one this is, but definitely requires a closer look. And some of these, even from a distance, don't look quite right. Rick?
Normal again, just drone cells.
Yep. And that's a foundationless frame, it looks like, because they've drawn a lot of different sizes of cells in that frame. Amy?
Normal?
Abnormal. So that's European foul brood, and that's a fairly advanced case of it. You see more of the sunken cappings. You see cappings that are perforated there and there. And then there's some really brown, nasty looking larvae in that frame. Kyle?
Abnormal.
Yep. Good. European foul brood. Same thing, twisted larva, brown larva. Rick?
Abnormal, probably American, European.
Yep. European. And it's hard to tell without the rope test, but yep, abnormal. Amy?
Normal?
Yep. And again, that's a pretty recently drawn frame because none of it's very dark. Yeah, that's another nice frame of capped brood, and then capped honey atop and off in the corners. Kyle?
Normal.
Yep. Lots and lots of royal jelly. Nice white shiny larva. There may be a little bit of a color cast to this one, but and like look at that cell. It's like just a huge amount of royal jelly and then just a little larva in there. Very well fed. Rick?
Normal, just a queen cell.
Yep. And again, it looks like it's on the edge of the brood nest, supersedure or emergency. Amy?
Abnormal? I don't know, actually.
Queen cells. They could be
That
normal or
many?
abnormal. Yeah. Yeah. So this is a little bit odd in that they stand out from the foundation quite a bit. But yeah, they'll do that many.
There's not much drawn comb around that.
See, this is drawn, but I don't think it's drawn out all the way. And then you
Right.
can't really tell what's going on up above because the bees are all covering it up. But yeah, it looks a little different, but it's not unusual to find them putting that many queen cells that close together.
So would you let that happen, like allow that to progress, or do you do something about that?
So from the text, what do you remember about?
I don't remember.
You don't remember.
I didn't actually get text this week, I don't think.
You know what? Kyle, I think, pointed out this morning, I may not have had the permission set on it. So even if you went to the link, you might not have been able to get into it. So it's out there and open
Okay.
now.
Because I actually, I mean, I would have probably made an effort to get to it, but it actually would have been hard
Sure.
for me.
No problem. No, that's not a problem. So when you open up a hive and you find queen cells already, Some books and some beekeepers will tell you, you tear all of those queen cells out to prevent them from swarming. And it doesn't work that way. So the chain of events that lead to them swarming is they start running out of room. They don't have any place to put the nectar. So they start putting the nectar in the brood nest. The queen runs out of places to lay because she can't lay in a cell that's got nectar in it. She runs around and she usually finds these cups that are pointed down. We call them queen cups. And she'll lay in those because there's nowhere else to lay. And then other bees come along and see the eggs in the queen cups that are pointing down, and they feed it nothing but royal jelly and raise new queens. Before that queen hatches, half of your bees fly off and go find a new home. So if you open up a hive and you find queen cells like this, and you just destroy them, you're trying to prevent them from swarming at the very last stage of the process. And it's just not likely to work. And the reason that they're swarming is they ran out of space. You destroy queen cells, you don't add any space. They're just going to raise some more or build some more. So yeah, this is a little bit abnormal because you're not always going to find queen cells when you open up a hive. And when you find this, yeah, you need to do something. Usually what I recommend, kind of need to figure out what's going on. So if something happened to the queen and they're replacing her, then you might want to just make a split. So half of the queen cells and bees go in one hive and the other half go in another hive, and roll the dice and let those queens go out and get mated. Hopefully you get 2 queens. It doesn't always work out that way. So if by making a split, you increase your odds of getting at least 1 good queen out of it. And after the fact, you figure out, did I get 2 queens or 1 queen? If I only got 1, you can combine them and you've saved the hive.
If you have that many queen cells on one frame, you're more than likely to have 2 or 3 other frames that do have queen cells on them also. So leave one of the frames in there that has queen cells, and you can pull one or 2 of the other ones out with a frame or 2 of bees and start another colony.
The other thing to consider is they may be raising these queens because the last time you were in the hive, you killed the old queen. And if you just go through and destroy all the queen cells, you just destroyed their chances of requeening and continuing. Now, if there's young enough larvae, they'll do it again. But that's the other thing, is you can't just go in there and destroy the queen cells and think it's going to fix things. You need to figure out what's going on, what caused them to get to this point.
If you're looking online and you see videos where the guys are doing that, where they're going in and just peeling those queen cells out of there, those are commercial beekeepers, most likely, and they don't care what's happening.
Yeah.
They're just trying to get rid of them and stop them from swarming.
And if you're going to put a new queen in, if you find this and you decide, okay, I'm going to go buy a new queen. Dean's got queens for sale, so you could destroy all of these queen cells. When you get done, you call Dean. Maybe you call Dean before.
Yeah.
Make sure he's got a queen to sell you. You could destroy all of these queen cells. The next day, when you get the queen in the cage, you come back, you look again, destroy all the queen cells, put a queen in a cage in there. So that's one thing that you can do too, or that you may do. If you don't have a purchased queen, then you're going to need to let them raise their own. Kyle, I think.
Ooh, shrunken heads.
Shrunken heads, you bet. Yep, so that's abnormal. That is sac brood. And you can see the same shrunken head all dried up over here. Rick?
Looks normal with just queen cells.
Queen cells, yep. So you can see the big old queen cell larva down in that one, and there's one in each of those, I'm sure. Amy, excuse me.
Normal?
Yep, normal healthy brood. Again, the picture may not be the greatest, but it's pretty well fed and bright white, shiny. And again, we've got that age thing going out from the capped to eggs out here. You can't really see them. Kyle?
Abnormal.
Yep. That is American foul brood, and it's a pretty advanced case. You see the moisture that's accumulating on them, and the cells are sunken, and yeah, brown, nasty looking larva.
European foul brood.
Yep.
Or
American foul brood. Sorry, I would have guessed European too. Yeah. Yeah, again, sunken cappings, perforated, melted brown larva. Amy?
I don't know, I'm gonna say normal.
Yeah, normal. Yeah, it's another nice frame of cap brood. Kyle?
Abnormal.
Yep, parasitic mite syndrome. See the mites? You can actually see some little brown mites on some of these. Plus, a lot of the larva is melted down. It's the wrong color. Rick?
Looks normal.
Yep, some cap drone brood, but other than that, pretty normal. Amy?
Probably abnormal.
Yep, spotty pattern. See how broken up it is, and then a lot of the larva is brown and yellow. Yep. All right. Yeah. Okay, so stop share. Yeah, Dean, you want to grab the lights? So I'm going to pull up the slides for tonight. I'm not going to try and read them, but if you see something up here that you didn't get or doesn't make sense, by all means stop and we'll talk about it. But I'll kind of go through the slides and go over some of the questions. So I just kind of came across or came around to this opinion when I was working on the slides this year that learning to inspect a beehive is as fundamental to beekeeping as learning to read is to education. It's really how you gain all of the information and make your decisions on what you do or don't need to do. So, and it takes some time. You know, you're not going to get it at first. I know we've talked about that, but don't be afraid to move the bees around and take your time. You know, if it's 50 degrees and chilly, you need to work pretty quick. But if it's 60, 65 and the sun is shining, you don't want to take all day pulling them apart, but you can take your time. You know, you don't have to rush. The bees aren't as freaked out about you pulling the frames out as what you would think they would be. So this picture is another good one of, you know, the older cap larva or cap broods, some open larva, and then yeah, you can't really see the eggs, but they're there. All right, let's see. So I don't remember where we left off. We'll start with you. So describe some of the importance about watching the entrance of the hive before you actually start inspecting.
Well, you just want to see their behavior to see if they're freaked out or something like that, or if they're just not luring, but telling the other bees where to come in and
Sure.
being calm, generally calm about that situation. And
Yep.
not a lot of in and out, but just
Right.
a fair amount.
And once you've got,
What did we see Sunday?
yeah,
We saw pollen on them.
saw pollen on the
They were
bees coming
They
in.
were bringing in pollen there on
Yep.
Sunday.
And what can that tell you? Does anybody know?
You know,
Raising brood.
There you go. So most of the time, like, I don't know, 90% of the time, if you see them bringing in pollen, they are raising brood. So like if you catch a swarm without having to disturb the hive, you can watch. When the bees start bringing in pollen, you know, they're either raising brood or they're about to. So you know that you got the queen and she's laying. So yeah, I think in February when they're bringing in pollen, it's just because there's pollen out there. Now, yeah, I mean, it's been warm enough, long enough. They are raising brood now, but yeah, that's a good one. Pollen coming in means they're raising brood. So Amy, tell us what you can do, and Phil Westra pointed this out when you're taking the cover off so the bees don't get freaked out by that pop. Remember?
What you can do about that noise?
Yeah.
I don't know if I remember that.
Basically, just put your hand on top of it when you're prying up on the corner with the hive tool, and just your hand on top of it really deadens that sound.
Okay.
I actually learned that myself from Phil. I always tell people have the smoker ready so when it goes pop, you puff some smoke under it right away. So now I have the smoker in this hand. I put this hand on top. I pop it off. I put a couple puffs of smoke under it, and then put the inner cover back down and wait 30 seconds to a minute. Let that smoke get down in there and have a chance to take effect. So having more than one hive or going to someone else's hive and watching that entrance, you get an idea for what's a normal amount of activity when the sun is shining. And that's another thing you can learn by watching the entrance first is, you got two hives and one of them is just busy as can be, and the other one there's only a couple of bees coming and going. There might be something wrong with that one that doesn't have a lot of activity. You go out there and it's 50 degrees out and there's no activity at either one. It's just because it's cold out. It's not the right kind of day for them.
Here's an activity we haven't really talked about yet, but I went to a couple other hives on Monday, I think. One was nice and warm. And one of them, all these bees were flying, they weren't flying out away from the hive. They were just kind of floating in front of the hive entrance and going up and down and back and forth just a little bit. And weren't flying to get anything. What do you suppose that would be? Any ideas?
Self-cleaning
Marker.
activity.
Marker for other ones to come back to, maybe.
We haven't talked about it.
A lot of it would probably be, this is the first time these bees have ever come out of the hive box.
Oh, like they're newbies.
Or it was last fall when they came out and
Okay.
they literally forgot where the hive is.
So it's called an orientation flight, orienteering. So they kind of fly out and look at the hive box, and then pretty soon they're out a few more feet away from it, looking to see where their box is, and then pretty soon a little bit farther out. And they made a bunch of these, when I was there Monday, came back in when I was working on it. But when I got there, they were just kind of hovering in front, just going up and down like this, just a whole bunch of them out there.
If you watch
So-
one bee, a lot of times they will spiral. It's like Dean says, they're looking at the entrance for a while, and then you'll see them kind of spiral around, and then the spirals get bigger and bigger. So they figured out this is where the entrance is at. Now they're starting to look around at landmarks and other places. So when they're flying back in, they can figure out, okay, like in my backyard, where there's this big house, and then there's this smaller garage, and then there's this beehive. So they make these spirals bigger and bigger until they learn the location.
So it isn't just like 5 or 6 of them, it's because that queen laid 500 eggs, at the same day, and they've all kind of hatched out in their 21 days, and then pretty soon they're done with their job, so this whole mess of a 500 or 1,000 bees are all trying to go out at the same time.
All right, so whose turn is it? Kyle. Yeah, you got elected. What should you observe before removing any frames from the hive?
How many frames are covered with bees?
How many frames are covered with bees? Yep. And let's see, maybe the next picture somewhere in here. There's like that one, for instance. Bees are just bursting out of that one. I actually think that I was smoking the bees up on this, which is not maybe a great picture, but compare that to, you can see there's some bees on the top of that box, but it's a big difference. So yeah, how many how many bees are on the top is something to look at before you get down into it. Sometimes you can also look down in between the frames and just see how many frames have bees working in between. If it's cold, a lot of times they don't come all the way up to the top.
And what happens when all those bees are on the top and you pump that smoke across the top of them? What happened to them?
They kind of went back down inside.
Yep, the smoke sends them back down. Rick, how do you tell the difference between capped brood and capped honey? Or describe the difference.
Honey's gonna be a lighter color than the brood.
Yep.
Generally, it's gonna probably be in the center. The brood will be more in the center than outer edge.
Yep, yeah, a lot of times it's the location in the frame, but yeah, the color of the cappings too. Yep. Amy, why do nurse bees keep pollen and nectar cells around the open larva cells? I know you didn't read it, but take a good
Because
guess.
they use that to feed them?
Yep. Because they actually eat the honey and pollen so that they can then generate royal jelly out of that hypophalangeal gland. So they need to eat it. They keep it real close to where they're actually feeding the bees. Yep. So Kyle, why is it important to look so closely at the larva when you're inspecting a colony?
One, checking for disease. Two, if your queen's doing a good job, they're all spaced out, and then you're getting a good idea of last time she was laying.
Yep.
So if you can't see the eggs, but you see larvae, then you'll know. Oh, it hasn't been too long.
Right. Yep. If you see larvae, she was there 4 or 5 days ago. If you see eggs, she was there within the last 3 days. Yep. Yep. And then the bee diseases will affect the larva first. Or another thing is you can't look at an adult bee and usually tell that it's sick, but you can look at the larva and tell that there's something wrong, that they have a bee disease. Yep. So that's a frame of capped honey. A little bit of open down there, but yeah, I don't know if we've seen too many frames, full frames of capped honey. Rick, how can you make it easier to see eggs in the cells?
I mean, darker foundation would be one.
Darker foundation does help. Yep. Yep.
That or some sort of magnifying glass, I guess.
Yeah. Also your cell phone. Take a picture with your cell phone, and then you can zoom in on the picture. What works really well is get the sun to your back, but let the sun shine onto the frame. Turn the frame until the sun hits the bottom of the cells.
Okay.
You get a little bit of light in there, and that helps a lot for really getting a good view of the larva too. But eggs in particular, you need pretty full sun to get a good look at them, or at least I do, depending on what glasses I wear that day. Now we already talked about that. Amy, can you think of some times when you might have to look for the queen when you're inspecting a hive?
I don't know, maybe if you're, I don't know, I mean, I guess maybe if you're getting less bees in general.
Sure. Yeah. So
Maybe if they're, yeah, I don't know.
So we're talking about counting how many frames of bees there are, right? And I maybe don't talk about it enough, but you probably should be keeping track. How many frames of brood did you find? How many frames of capped brood? How many frames of open brood? So by keeping track of that, you start to get a feel for what should be in there. So if you open up a hive and it's like, there were 10 frames of capped brood in this last time, and now there's only a couple, something is going on. The queen's not laying like she used to be. So if you look and you discover, okay, there's places for her to lay. It's not full of nectar. There are places for her to lay, but there aren't any baby bees in there. Maybe there's no queen. So then you would kind of go backwards. You see little young larvae. Do you see eggs? Can you find it? You can't find eggs. You can't find a queen. something maybe happened to her and you need to replace her. Kyle, can you tell me how to find a queen or some of the techniques to help you find the queen?
Watching for bees getting out of the way.
Yep.
They might all be standing around pointing at her.
Yep.
Look for the shine off the
Off of her abdomen or
whatever part that is.
thorax. All right, yeah, I get it wrong too. Well, it's a little bit of both. Sometimes it shines off of the thorax, the long part too, but I think mainly it's the abdomen because it's so big and round and usually not much hair on it. So yeah, when you saw the queens up at Dean's, did that make sense then? Did you notice once you saw her that the bees around her act differently? Did that register?
I didn't notice that. Like for
Okay.
me, I feel like they looked like they were kind of like, it was more of like a clump, kind of like. She
More-
was like more of like, there was like a bulging of bees almost versus like
Okay,
just a thin layer. It's how it kind of looked to me.
okay.
But I don't know, maybe I'm wrong.
When it's colder out, you may see more of that. They're trying to keep her warm and there's more bees around her. In the summertime, and it depends on the queen or the strength of the pheromones, but like you see pictures sometimes where there's a whole ring of bees all the way around her. They're all facing her. Not every queen gets that kind of reaction, but it is a different reaction than because when a bee bumps into another bee, they just bump into each other. When a bee bumps into the queen, they either move out of her way or they turn and face her. It's just
So
totally.
why would there be a whole bunch of them facing her? What would they be doing? There's probably 6 things that all those worker bees facing her would be doing.
They could be feeding her.
Yep, feeding her is one of them. Dean's going to have to list off all 6.
Do they clean? Do they clean her?
Yep, they clean her. What are the rest,
And
Dean?
pick up their pheromone,
Yep, and spread it around, pass it around. Yep.
and carry away any feces that might come from the queen.
Yep.
Protection. And keep her warm.
Yep. Rick, I think it's your turn. When might you expect to find queen cells when you're looking at a hive?
When they're ready to swarm, I mean, when they have filled up their
Yep.
space
Yep.
with either brood or honey
Yep.
or nectar.
Why is it important to look for nectar in the brood frames when you're inspecting?
I mean, I don't know, I guess to be sure that they are getting their food from source from something to feed
Or-
the eggs and that, I don't know.
To make sure they're not running out of space, because that running out of space leads to swarming. So remember looking at the pictures, you guys weren't sure on the ones with nectar. Is that nectar or is that royal jelly down in there? And when you're going through a brood nest fairly quick, you can kind of get fooled by that. So it's like you pull the frame out and it's not capped brood, but oh, it looks like there's royal jelly in there. Well, if you're not looking real close and determining, is it royal jelly and eggs, larva, or is it nectar? It turns out that you go all the way through the hive and don't notice that that brood nest is full of nectar. Before you get back there the next time, they'll probably swarm on you, or definitely be in the process of swarm. So it was kind of hard to see in the pictures, and if you're not taking time, it's kind of hard to see on the frames too, or you can miss it, especially if you're not moving the bees out of the way and really seeing, okay, what's really in the cells. Yeah, that nectar, and you'll catch it at times where, if your frame is this big, you will see nectar in here and open cells in the center. So they haven't completely filled it up, but they're starting. So that's like the very beginnings of overcrowding is the outer edges of those brood frames get filled with nectar. So that's something to watch for too. I answer some of these questions on my own, so. I did the quiz. I had Chat GPT do it. And sometimes it's like, I think it gets questions out of order. So Kyle, what are some things you can do when you find swarm cells to prevent them from swarming?
Add another box of frames on top. That's probably the main thing, isn't it? You might want to shuffle around the frames a little bit, maybe.
So if you find queen cells, you're going to have to give them quite a bit of space, or they're going to end up swarming anyway. So I think you should make a split or multiple splits if you've got the equipment and want to get some extra bees. And we talked a little bit earlier about you might want to also find out why they're raising queens. Is it an emergency cell? Did something happen to the queen? Or are they out of space and they're swarming? Because if there's something wrong with the queen, then you need to make sure that both parts of your splits have queen cells and the ability to raise a new queen. But if you just put a honey super on and they already have capped queen cells in there, they'll probably swarm, especially if it's undrawn foundation. They just won't really see that as space yet because it's not drawn out, it's not usable. So yeah, if you find capped queen cells. Now, if you find what I just talked about where they're just starting to fill the brood frames, there you can add a honey super, put some empty frames down in the brood nest, and you know, you're catching it soon enough there that you can prevent swarming by adding space.
Is there any thought to adding some, before they get to that stage, having them draw it and then taking it out, put some more in so you have some drawn frame on hand in case you get to that point where you can just drop it in and they're like, hey, we're good to go. Or not.
Yeah, well, if if you've got quite a few hives, chances are you'll have some drawn frames somewhere. And I learned this Omaha Bee Club meeting. Michael Bush, I don't know, you guys know who Michael Bush is. He talked about when you catch it, like I said, they're filling the brood nest, but it's not completely full yet. There's no queen cells. If you put a drawn frame in there, the bees can store nectar in that like that. The queen might get to it and start laying in it. If you put a frame of foundation in there, as the bees start to draw those cells out, the queen can lay in them before they're completely drawn. They can't put nectar in them until they're almost fully drawn. So it's actually better to put an undrawn frame of foundation in the center of the brood nest. That adds more space, gives the queen a place to lay sooner.
I think it's a second year, after you've had the bees for a year or so, and have some, that'd be more of a chance where you would have an extra frame, or drawn comb that you could switch around or something. Like if you're just starting out, you got to get all these other ones drawn out to begin with. Usually takes your first year to get that build up.
If you come across this situation, they're starting to backfill the brood nest with nectar, and you just have one box, so you're going to add your second box. There's a time where you might want to take some of those nectar frames and pull them up into the top box. And if you've got drawn frames, you could put them down in the brood nest or foundation. But yeah, especially if you just got behind times and you don't want to set the bees back a whole lot, and you've got drawn comb. Yeah, drawn comb will get the bees going faster. But yeah, pull some of the nectar frames up into the new box. Put some empty drawn comb down in the brood nest.
There's just so many options, and a lot of times new beekeepers want this recipe book with when do I do this, how do I do that, what time, and it's like, mess around with it yourself and you'll learn that way, I think.
So this is a good picture, and unfortunately it's not my picture. I don't have a copyright on it, but that's a good one of the queen retinue. Is that how they pronounce it? See how almost all of those bees are facing her? And it's just, it's totally random the way the bees are looking out here. So, big
So some
difference.
of those that are right up to her, like I said, spreading pheromone, 2, 3, 4 of those might get her smell onto their bodies, and then they take off through the rest of the hive. That pheromone spreads with those worker bees as they travel the different frames, and that's kind of what keeps the whole colony calm too.
So there's a brood frame full of nectar. So anybody, I don't remember whose turn it is. Any of you remember the Jamie Ellis information that's in the text? So is talking about supersedure when the bees determine that the queen isn't right, and the bees have a way of knowing if she's not producing enough or she's laying drones where there shouldn't be drones. They can figure it out. I think a lot of times it's the pheromone of the queen gets weak, and the bees will raise a new queen. They'll go to the edge of the brood nest where there's larvae that's the right age and raise a queen. If you're not marking your queens every year, I think that this supersedure happens a lot more often than people think. So this Jamie Ellis study, they marked all the queens and they tracked them and they didn't replace them. Most of the queens either failed or got replaced within 6 months. And of all of the queens in the study, none of them were there after 2 years. So that's, I mean, 2 years is about the maximum that the bees are it's gonna work and not have to replace her. So.
The bees that we have today are under a lot more stress than some of the bees that they're talking about in older books and text.
Yeah.
They tend to one of the indications is that life of the queen is shorter than it has been.
Yeah.
The legend was, 5, 6, 7 years old queen.
Well, yeah, I think the
That's not happening.
the old books used to recommend you replace your queen about every 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
And now it looks like they don't even make it 2 years. So yeah, it is different. Something has changed.
Have a plan in your mind of where you're going to get another queen if you suddenly find you're queenless.
So how long, I don't remember whose turn it is. We'll pick on you. How long does it take for a new queen to start laying?
Just to go out and get fertilized. Is it
A
6 weeks?
newborn queen, you mean?
Yep. So 24 days. So this is the chart from the text. So let's say that you're in and inspecting the colony and you accidentally pinch the queen and kill her and you don't know it. So the bees will know within hours. So you're in here on this day and you accidentally killed the queen. So the bees are going to find a larva that's 12 to 24 hours old, and they're going to start feeding it royal jelly and raise a new queen. Actually, you're going to find several of them. But so from emerging to laying, the queen is going to take 24 days. If you're raising queens, you got to add, well, no, you usually grab from here. Never mind. So 24 days. So there's capped brood and eggs and larvae of all stages when this happened, when you killed the queen. And they're just going to progress as normal. How long does it take to go from egg to an emerging bee?
22 days.
21. Very, very close. 21 or 22. Actually, this one says 22. So at this point, all of the bees that were eggs, when you accidentally pinched the queen, they've emerged at day 22. The new queen isn't laying until day 24. And then the eggs that she lays are going to take 21 days to emerge. So they're not going to start to emerge until here. So you got 23 days, no brood emerging. So does that now make it a little clearer why it's important to have figured out where you're going to get a queen from? Because if you're just going to let the bees raise their own, in that 23 days, since the bees are dying off every 4 to 6 weeks because they're working so hard, you could lose almost half of your population before this new queen starts laying. So it's a big setback.
It depends on what time of year, if you did that in May compared to doing it in August or something, it's really gonna be a setback.
In August, you will not recover. Just isn't enough
Well,
time.
if they had enough honey in August, they'll be okay. But if
you
it's,
bought a queen in August, you're fine.
They might be able to raise one and get her mated, if there's plenty of
Yeah.
honey in there. Now, if it happened in the middle of September, there probably aren't enough drones out there for her to
Oh,
mate
no,
with.
no.
So, yeah, timing is important, and there's a lot of
The
variables.
drones are a big deal too with their.
Yep.
There was, several years ago, there was a tendency for them to destroy the drones also in the hives. When you found drones that were useless. I don't know how that came about, because logic will tell you, you have to have drones to make more bees.
Only if you're mating queens, which a lot of beekeepers aren't, so they just don't want the drones around
Right.
to draw on their resources. Yeah. Did we interrupt you, Amy?
Well, I was just thinking about, like the temperament of the queen bee. When she goes out and mates, whatever, finds the, drone,
Mm-hmm.
does that contribute to the bees that are laying, or like the personality or the temperament of those, or is that not matter at all? It's all the queen bee?
Okay, so yeah, where do the worker bees in the hive get their personality from? Is kind of what you're asking.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
but like the drone that she, what do you call it? Like
Mates
mates
with.
with,
Mhm.
does that? Yeah, I guess.
No, I know where you're headed. So the queen has got 2 sets of chromosomes, and the drones only have one,
Mhm.
which kind of complicates matters a little bit. But so the queen goes out and she'll mate with, I think the average is about 20 different drones.
Mhm.
Could be more or less.
Mhm.
Yeah, when she lays an egg, she chooses to lay a fertilized egg if it's a worker. So that fertilized worker gets half of the genetics from the queen, half from
That's
the
what I was
drone
wondering.
that the sperm was from.
Mhm.
So if she mated with 20 different drones,
Mhm.
these worker bees in the hive are half sisters. You could literally have 20 different, what's the word I'm looking for, subfamilies? Is that right?
Mhm.
So, 20 drones, and each drone has got 1,000 workers in the hive, and it's 20,000 bees total. Yeah. So yeah, half of their traits, which can be personality or how well they make honey,
Mhm.
how swarmy they are, half of that comes from the queen, and half of it comes from the drones that the queen mated with. Yeah.
The queen will never mate with her own drones either.
All right. So we've talked quite a bit, I think, about swarming already tonight. So this picture is a cutout I did in my second year. This is in somebody's porch wall, the outside of their house. So these, it's only about that wide. So these frames are kind of drawn on the diagonal. And see the way they run from top to bottom of that cavity? So that's kind of like in a tree, where they start out at the top. Where were the bees when you went through Dean's hives? Where were the bees at right now? Top box or bottom box? Were they in the bottom?
I don't know.
Were they? Okay.
Why weren't they in the top?
Um,
When you picked it up, remember what that was like? Top box was still full of honey.
Still full of honey. Okay. So in a normal winter, they will have eaten their way up and they'll be in the top box. So same thing in this wall cavity and in a tree out there in the wild. So the bees, through the winter will eat the honey and work their way up to the top. Hopefully they don't get all the way to the top. And when it warms up, the queen's going to start laying in this area. And she will run out of space and she'll lay a little further down. And she'll run out of space and she'll lay a little further down. When these bees up here hatch, the worker bees are going to fill those areas with nectar and honey. So the brood nest actually works its way down throughout the season. And when they get all the way down here to the bottom and fall comes around, it's all honey up above them. They don't need any new brood, and they start the process over again. They eat their way up to the top. So that's what's happening in our hives, but the difference is we have the ability to manipulate them. We can put more honey boxes above, and we can make them put more honey, going up. A lot of beekeepers in the spring will reverse the boxes so the bees work their way up instead of working their way down. But I thought that picture could use a little explanation. So these are queen cups. So this is the bottom bar of the frame. This is one that Dean had in here earlier. So you can see these are normal brood cells out here, going up to the top bar. And then you get this bulge down at the bottom, and all of a sudden it turns a corner. Look at all of these cells that are pointing down. So when you see those in a hive, don't get excited. They build so many of those, they're always there. But take a look at them, because if you see eggs or larvae in them, they're headed towards the swarm process. So she ran out of space and she laid in one of those, and they're going towards the swarm process.
And if you see them open like that, those cells are, it won't be, 3 days, they'll be closed. It'll be like a little peanut hanging there.
If there was a larvae in there.
Right,
Yeah.
right, exactly.
So in the swarming process, if I had a open couple of boxes and I put them out, would they prefer to go to that, or would they go to wherever they feel
The
is
swarm?
comfortable?
They have a tendency to go to a hive or something that's had bees in it before. The beehive smells, even without any bees or any honey in it. You got wax or propolis. It's got a certain smell that attracts them. They prefer, I want to say, like an 8 frame deep as far as volume. They prefer an 8 frame deep, about 15 feet off of the ground, with an entrance towards the bottom,
Oh, so they want
facing
up.
south.
They want.
Yeah.
up.
Yeah, so there've been quite a few studies where they put out bait hives and they try all different combinations, setting them on the ground. And moving
I was
them
just
up.
wondering if you're worried about that happening. If
It's
you had
not-
one out there, if that would be.
I always keep a bait hive near my hives, and I try and hang it on a tree, not 15 feet, what's reasonable, but also empty equipment.
Yeah.
And I've had them move into empty equipment in my backyard, sitting right alongside of another beehive. But yeah, I always put a bait hive.
I've had empty ones out for 2 years but I also don't know that I've had a swarm either in that time. But I've kept empty hives out in the area.
And the boxes we went through Sunday, that we transferred over into the hive body. When we put those old frames back in that new box, and I just left them sit out there. 2 hours later or so, there was a whole bunch of bees in there. They were snooping around there when we were outside. But I took that package and put it back in my truck, I think. Went to that new box, and there's still some on the outside, and I opened up that lid, and there's probably 200 bees in there.
Oh my gosh.
So then I just opened up the cover, had it so it was open, waited until dark, because as it gets darker, they're gonna go back home because there's nothing there for them. But it was just surprising the number that went right there. It wasn't like they were swarming or anything, but they were just snooping around for whatever they could smell and someplace to check things out.
There are certain times of the year when they get really curious and they check out especially old bee equipment or unoccupied bee boxes. Like in the fall, when there just aren't a whole lot of flowers, they'll check out your garbage can and your pop can sitting around. Yeah, so right now is probably one of those times there's not a lot for them to do. There is pollen coming in right now. So here's another picture of queen cups, like that one. This one here, I'd take a really close look at that because that might already have larvae in it. That one, I don't think so. This one, maybe. You can see there's a little bit of a difference in how far drawn out those are. So that one I'm not concerned about at all, neither one of those, but that one I'd look real close in. And then these, can't really tell from the picture, but those are drawn out quite a bit further. Those all had queens in them, queen cells in them. That hive was getting ready to swarm. And they're all on the bottom of the frame. They kind of extend down into that next box down below, as opposed to being on the edge of the brood nest on the side of the frame. So these are swarm cells, not supersedure or emergency cells. And the main thing as far as space is you want to keep ahead of them. Give them space before they start running out of room. All right, anybody want to talk about splits? And do you have plans, equipment? Do you have an idea what you want to try? If you come across queen cells, that is.
I need to get more equipment.
I
That
wouldn't
would-
mind
it would be
trying
a-
to move a brood cell or a brood frame and a honey frame and a queen cell into another one, but I don't know if that would take or not.
Sure. Yeah, so you know the nuke box that your 5-frame nukes comes in? It's good to have a few of those around. So let's say you've got one hive, you get in there and you find a bunch of frames with queen cells, and you still have 2 old nuke boxes. So you could literally take one frame of bees and brood and the queen cell, and one frame of honey and bees. That's the bare minimum. And you could put that in one nuke box. You take another frame of bees, brood, and the queen cell, and another frame of honey and bees, and put it in the other nuke box. If your main hive still has a lot of bees in it, take a second, or I'm sorry, take a third frame for each one, maybe even a fourth, depending on how big and how full it is. Yeah. And yes, if you now have 3 hives, if you find the queen in the original one and she's doing fine, you could make sure there are no queen cells left in the original one. So then you've got 2 new queens that need to go out and get mated. And let's say you got a 50-50 chance of everything going right, you may only end up getting 1 queen out of it. But you can take the frames from the box that didn't get a good queen and put them in with the queen that did work out. You'll have to have a box at that point. The 5-frame nuke isn't going to work, but yeah, having a couple of 5-frame nuke boxes around is pretty handy for
And then
those.
when you pull these frames out of this hive that has the queen cells on it, you gotta make sure you put some more frames back in, because if you leave 2 frames of space in there, they're gonna fill that up with wax comb that you won't be able to do anything with.
Yep. And by adding those foundation frames in the original hive, what else have you done? Created space, which space is why they were going to swarm in the first place. They ran out of space. Yeah. Yeah. A lot of times, like if you had 2 10-frame deeps and you go in there and you find queen cells, you're probably going to find, I don't know, 6 frames with queen cells on them. And at 20 frames of bees, it wouldn't be impossible to end up making 6 splits out of that. Now, you're not going to get honey out of any of them. So it might be an advantage to find the queen, keep her in the original hive, get rid of all the queen cells, and try and keep a workforce in that original hive so you get some honey off of them, and then maybe only make 4 splits. But you're increasing your odds. If you don't do anything, you're going to lose half of the bees, and they're going to raise 1 queen in the original hive, and now you've only got 1 hive and 1 queen. Whereas if you make 5 or 6 splits, you're going to end up getting 3 or 4 new hives, new queens out of it. You can always keep those in smaller hives in case you need a queen in an emergency, or in case somebody else needs a queen in an emergency. When you find capped queen cells, all of the effort has gone into raising those already. So the more queens you get out of it, the better off, or the more efficient it is. It takes a lot of energy for them to raise all of those capped queen cells. So you just will take advantage of it when you
You
come
just have
across
to
it.
take into consideration what your big plan is. You just wanna have 2 hives and that's it? And maybe a little extra, or do you wanna all of a sudden have 6 or 10 hives to take care of? It just increases your cost and your time, everything. Some people have plans to jump in with both feet and go whole hog with it. And some people, I got 2 hives, that's all I wanna have. I don't want any more.
Getting back to the 5-frame nuke scenario, you could raise a new queen in that, and when they start running out of space, you could pull that frame, put it in your other hive, and put a new foundation frame in there. So you could keep a queen as a backup in a 5-frame nuke if you just keep adding an undrawn frame to give them some space. And like I said, maybe some other beekeeper ends up needing a queen and you decide, no, mine are doing fine. So you sell the queen or sell the whole nuke. That's an option too. So we haven't talked too much about this, but it was in the text as far as requeening. So let's say you get a queen and she's just not doing well, or the bees are angry, so you decide you want to replace the queen and get less angry bees. Usually you'll buy a queen. She'll be in a queen cage. There's a few different designs, so don't do like I did and pull the cork and assume that there's candy in there. There's not always candy in there. And what you want to do, I'll go through this a little bit. So a couple of reasons why you might want to requeen is the old queen's failing, or the queen that you have is aggressive. If you had a bunch of European foul brood and they were having a hard time with it, sometimes it's a good idea to requeen. I raise queens, so when I find a hive that has European foul brood, not just a touch of it, I want to get rid of that queen. I don't want to raise new queens from her. I don't want those drones going out and mating with queens. So I'll replace a queen that has had some kind of disease. So you want to get your new queen in a cage, and you want to prepare the hive by finding the old queen. If she's still in there, there's no chance that they're going to accept the new queen if you don't find her and get rid of her. If it was a weak queen, you might want to go through it and look for queen cells, because they may have figured that out and they may have started raising a queen. So you want to destroy those because they won't accept a queen in the cage if they're raising their own. You may find that they had queen cells and the queen emerged, so now you've got a virgin queen in there. You'll have to go through looking for a virgin queen. So put the queen in her cage, in between a couple of frames, make sure the bees can get to her to take care of her and feed her through the screen. Even though they want to kill her, they will still feed her and take care of her through the screen. Doesn't make any sense, but works good for us. After 3 or 4 days, they should have gotten used to her, and you can go and either pull the cork and directly release her, or pull the cork and let them eat through the candy. That covers about all of that. So I've got these videos, and I think they're pretty good at how to tell when the bees have not accepted the queen and how to tell when they have. So let's play.
The last video
just
I
a little
did,
bit.
it showed a queen being accepted and how they acted when they accepted her. Well, here's the opposite side of the spectrum, what happens. Can you see this right here? This little ball.
Ball of bees. See how it's rolling almost when he touches it?
That they've got going on right here. You'll see the queen. They're balling this queen. This was actually the swarm. If you remember my last video, when I had the swarm in the air and I used a stick and the pole with a frame on it to get it down, and then I come over and I watched that swarm come in. Well, when I come down here yesterday and I was checking, they was balling the queen and I had her balled up in the bottom of the hive. Well, I rescued her, saved her, and put her in one of these cages here, one of these little plastic cages. Well, I put her in the cage, put her back in the hive for a couple of days, and I plugged it up with wax where they couldn't get it out. Well, they got it out. But as you can see right here, there's absolutely no mistaking what this looks like.
I was hoping to see the queen. I thought
These bees are angry.
there she is. She's got a yellow mark on her. So did you see her?
They absolutely hate this queen. There's something about her they don't like. And a little while ago, I already made one video, but my camera shut off right in the middle of it, so I had to restart it.
He's not very good
So
at getting the subject in the frame either.
she actually has flown away and then flew back a couple times. She don't want to leave, but they're going to kill her.
I don't know if she's in his
I've
hand or
never
not.
seen this guy with gloves on either. I've seen hundreds of his videos. How they do that, I never figured out.
So this is the opposite. This is
When it
a
looks
queen
good
in
for
a
the
cage that
queen,
they
they're
did
gonna
accept.
her. If they're aggressive aggressively trying to kill her, you can't hardly pull them off this wire.
See how they just kind of move out of his way.
See how they're easy to come off? And the other thing too, you can see it's like they're feeding the queen through the cage, and also you can see some of them fanning. Those are all good signs that they're going to accept the queen. Now, I'll see if I can find one here. It's not sure yet. I'm still watching here to see what. I just want to show you the signs. Now, if they want to kill her, you'll see them curled up like in the workers will be like in a stinging position.
So if they're still trying to kill her, they're on that screen and they're kind of like hunched up, where if they had to, they could sting real quick, as opposed to these are just mainly head down and just walking across it. So anyway, those two give you some ideas of what it looks like when they're not accepting her versus when they are. Okay, so this is a picture of laying workers. So when you see a couple of eggs in a cell, that's not something to be concerned about. New queens, virgin queens will do that occasionally, maybe even an old queen once in a while. But you see how there's 5 or 6 or more in every cell. So that's signs of a laying worker. And I don't have a whole lot of text here, but there's a link to a place you can go out. And a lot of things I'm finding people recommend that you give them a frame of brood, and maybe 5 days later give them another frame of brood. And after you've done that a couple of times, then maybe introduce a queen in a cage. If you don't have open brood in there, I guess it's hopeless. You can't get them to accept a new queen. Another thing that people will do is take all of these frames out and shake them outside of the hive. Most of the bees will find their way back into the hive, but something about being shaken out on the ground, it kind of disorients them. It's kind of like a swarm. They get back in the hive and there's a couple frames of brood and this new queen in a queen cell, and they think, oh, things are different, and the laying worker stops somehow.
Would they raise a queen with one of those broods you put in
They might.
if they're at the right stage?
Yeah, they might. So, anytime you find a hive and discover the queen is dead, and maybe you can't find one to buy or you don't want to buy one, you can take a frame of brood from another hive and put in there, and they will find the right age larva and raise a new queen from it. So that's one of
As long as
those.
it has fresh eggs in it.
Yep. Yeah, it's got to be the right age larva, so 12 to 24-hour-old larva. So if it's got eggs in it, they'll wait, or if it's got larvae that are already the right age.
You got about a 5-day window there, pretty
Yeah.
much from egg to couple-day-old or new larva.
Yeah.
That they could use.
Yep.
Potentially.
Yep. And there are situations where the bees don't figure it out. Something happened to the queen and they don't start raising a new one. And you're right, if that 5-day window is passed, they don't have larvae that's young enough to raise a new queen. That's when you got to step in, get them a new queen, or pull a frame of brood from some other hive. Yep. All right, so
That'll be the hive that you come up to and they're not doing anything. They're just hanging around the doorway, lollygagging around inside, not doing too much.
I gotta pee.
When there's any forage out there at all, they are coming in and out and moving. When they are queenless, they basically stop working.
So they appear depressed, basically.
Yeah.
They're just kind of,
Yeah.
what are we doing?
So then they still, they just live longer because they're not exhausting themselves by going out and working, or do they still eventually just die off?
I wouldn't say that would be a factor. The laying worker is putting eggs in all those things. Are the workers gonna hatch to drones necessarily?
Yes, because they haven't been out and mated, so
Yeah.
you're gonna have unfertilized eggs that a worker will lay. And you might come across a frame like that and it's all completely drones.
Yeah.
No worker brood at all in there
Yeah.
because there's no fertilized eggs.
And that's another good sign that your queenless.
Well, an overabundance of drones is, wouldn't say it was a sign of it, but
Not a good sign either, if there's a ton of drones.
Well,
And maybe-
another thing is if the queen is getting older
yeah,
and losing the sperm that she's used up, and she's still laying eggs, but there's no sperm to fertilize them, that's another sign. The bees are gonna kind of pick up on that.
It's their last hurrah to spread their genetics before
Yeah.
they die.
Yep.
Make a bunch of drones.
yeah, the number of drones in the hive is not necessarily anything to be concerned about.
So it's kind of
They will
variable.
regulate how many drones.
Yeah.
About 20% or so is what would be normal.
Did I read somewhere they were saying something about drones having some other benefit? I don't remember what they said. Maybe they were helping to keep the brood warm, maybe?
No, they're
Somewhat.
more likely the drone larva helps with the varroa mites.
Okay.
The mites like the drone larva because it's in the cell longer.
Yeah, we talked about the foundress mite lays like let's say an egg every day or an egg every other day. Drones are under the capping a couple of days longer. That's 2 more eggs that she can lay. That's 2 more days for those to get older and turn into mature mites by the time the capping comes off. I'm just going to pull this up real quick. Maybe we can talk about it. Let's see. Okay, so I showed you this at the very beginning of class, but we haven't really talked about it too much more. And I'm sure at the beginning of class, none of this made any sense and was overwhelming. But now, does it make sense? Now, is this something you'd print off and refer back to? What do I need to be doing? Oh, it's June. Oh, I need to get the honey supers on. Or it's March. I need to make sure that the bees have enough honey. A lot of times, like Dean was saying, new beekeepers want a recipe, and when they get to figuring out, there's so many variables. There isn't really a recipe card. Well, how about a calendar? And sometimes a calendar works. You have to keep in mind that every year is different. The dandelions bloom 1 or 2 weeks early, so that gives you like a 3-week spread, and the apple trees and all of that. So I especially like to point out the mite population compared to the bees. So it's typically pretty low in these early months, and that bee-informed partnership map shows that it's kind of nationwide, that it's pretty low in the spring. People have even gotten to the point where they recommend treating at a lower threshold in the spring than in the middle of the summer. But the really critical part is right here where the bee population starts going down is where the mite population really starts going up. So not only are there more mites, there are fewer bees, which means there's more mites per bee. So they're having more of a negative effect. So there's a time to really pay attention and make sure the bees aren't about to crash because of the mites. Or here is a good time in August to test for mites, and if it's over the threshold, then treat them. Hopefully you got your honey supers off and you can treat them at that point.
So I wasn't here during the mites,
Sure.
but with my beer brewing and all of that, I might grow hops. And what I've read is that the beta acid off of the hops does not allow the varroa mite to hang on. Is that what
Okay,
I've heard.
there is a mite treatment it's called Hop Guard, and it's based on whatever that ingredient in hops is. So there's some different levels of the treatments. Like you're starting out with some organic things like the Hop Guard and thymol. Thymol is the active ingredient in thyme. So those they're natural. They don't tend to hang around in the hive as long as some other things. And then you get out to the more harsher chemicals. Yeah, it's not on this chart, but
Yeah, I
thymol is
was
one of
just,
them.
I read about, when I was looking at getting the rhizomes for the hops,
Mhm.
that was one of the features that they said, well, it's great for bees, because then the varroa mites can't hang on,
So
you know.
possibly they would be foraging on that and put it in the propolis, perhaps? Some of the
Yeah,
hops?
so
Probably
hops,
not.
if you do it right, is the female, and the hop flower is that green thing that everybody shows, so that is the flower.
It's the flower.
So they would be
Like maybe
feeding off
working
of
the
that.
pollen or the nectar.
And it's an oil, it's called the lupin gland in the center of the hop flower that they get the oil from. So
Okay.
that definitely could correlate to what's happening here.
So
You're
this,
starting one more thing for us to learn.
Yeah, right.
It never ends.
so this other one, oxalic acid, there's several different ways that you can use that, but that comes from rhubarb leaves. It's natural in rhubarb leaves. But planting rhubarb by the hive doesn't necessarily mean that it's gonna
Right.
do any good, especially leaves. Bees don't do anything with leaves. So I think that the hop guard or the hop is a good idea, but you probably want to use the beekeeping.
Sure. I mean, I was gonna grow hops anyway, so that's not a
Yeah.
big deal. It's just a matter of where I grow them in relation to the hives, but.
Yeah. And I'm sure there's a little bit of bees can figure out what they need, and if it's available in nature, go out and bring it into the hive. Sure, there's some of that going on.
So it's like a vine, and the hop is like a green, it almost looks like a really leafy green pine cone. And you put hops in beer because it's a preservative, and that's what gives it its bittering flavor and stuff like that. But hops is an oil essentially that you boil into the beer and it preserves it. That's what hops in original intent was for, but now they use it for flavorings and IPAs and all kinds of things like that. So.
Here's the hop guard stuff that they have for mites. It's in Man Lake's catalog. It doesn't have it, but
Yeah, the hop plant, hops is what it's referred to,
Okay.
more in beer brewing, but yeah, it's essentially, it's a root that, in the spring, it'll grow up to a foot a day, I think, and it's a vine, and so they put up big telephone poles and run wires, and then, tendrils down, and then the hops just kind of climbs up it, but, yeah, hops can get 16 to 20 feet, and they start every year.
They'll come back every year,
Yep,
even
yep.
in our neck of the
Because
woods.
you buy the rhizome, which is, the root
Mhm.
essentially.
Yep.
And yeah, certain ones will do better here than other places, but.
Sure.
But yeah, at the end of the season, those cones start to get papery, and that's when you know you need to harvest them, and then you just cut them from the line, take them down, and you kind of take a claw and you pull off
Okay.
of those, and then you can either dry them out, you can use them, they call it wet. If you ever see wet hops, that's using them wet, is just straight off the vine, or you dry them out and just preserve them and use them later on.
Cool. So you notice there's only one on the chart, one mite treatment. I guess I should clarify, these are the mite treatments. So apivar, oxalic acid, formic acid, thymol, and then oxalic acid again. Formic acid, evidently you can have it on when the honey supers are on. I don't know about hop guard if you can or not, but that's something to pay real close attention to. You don't want to treat with mites with something that could contaminate the honey. So it used to be we would check for mites, like we'd pull our honey supers in sometime in August and we'd check for mites, and we'd still have time to get a mite treatment in. Now it's like most commercial guys are checking once a month, or if they check, a lot of them are just treating. You got thousands of hives, I can understand. It doesn't, you don't have the time to check them all and figure out which ones you treat and which ones you don't. But, you know, for hobbyists and sideliners with a couple of hives, you can check them all, find the ones that need to be treated. But a lot of people are checking every other month and, you know, treating every month, every other month if they need it. But a couple of things to pay attention to here is like this one is not when the honey supers are on. I don't think thymol is either. The oxalic acid is out to each end, and that's because it doesn't penetrate the cappings. So when you're like vaporizing it, it's really good about killing the mites that are on the bees on the outside, but it doesn't get through the cappings. So what's going on this time of year and this time of year? There's no brood. There aren't any mites under the capping, so it's more effective because it's exposed to more mites. So
Is formic acid, what is in a bee sting? Or is that in ants?
no,
I
I
don't
don't.
remember.
Bee stings are melatonin,
Must have been ants.
something like
then.
that.
Formic acid.
I didn't realize
I
that
think
it
it's
was in an ant sting.
Maybe fire ants or maybe the other kind of ants.
Oh, that
can
could be
sting.
fire ant. Yeah, yeah, that could be. Yeah.
So thymol, would that just make the honey taste bad because it's not really bad for you?
Well, one thing
Per
to
se.
consider,
But it have a weird flavor, I imagine.
you know, when people talk about, well, yeah, it's natural. The oxalic acid is natural. It occurs in broccoli, and we eat it. Not at that concentration. And the same with the thyme oil. Or, I use that one when I have to treat. And as soon as you pull the top cover off, you can smell it. Even when the bees have taken it out and it's just the remaining tray, you can still smell it out in the open. It's a lot stronger than what you actually get
So
out.
if you were growing thyme and you chopped up a bunch and threw it on top of the, and put the lid back,
Yeah.
cover back on, I wonder if there'd be enough in there that they would
Yeah, whether or not it's enough,
they'd start
Yeah.
chopping it up and hauling it out, I suppose.
yeah, they will. Yep, absolutely will. There is a recipe for sugar syrup and rhubarb. I don't think it's the leaves. I think it's the actual stems. And I don't know that mites is all that it's supposed to help them with. It's supposed to give them some other kind of boost. But Dwayne Byam sent that out, I think. So it might be. He evidently thought there was some truth to it.
There's not much oxalic acid in the stem. It's more in the leaves.
More in
but
the
maybe
leaf.
there's something else in the, well, there's sugar in the stem,
Yeah.
more sugar in the stem.
I've also seen a study on bananas that you can put half a banana on top of the frames and the bees will use some of it and haul some of it out and that it actually has a benefit that I think it boosts brood production and it's an actual study that showed a significant difference. So
And they were using bananas that weren't fumigated, so it wasn't, presumably, it wasn't what was
I
on
don't
the
know
outside.
about that one. But the other thing about bananas is the alarm pheromone smells like bananas. So they say don't eat bananas and then go check the bees. But yet you can cut one in half and put it on top and they don't seem to get all freaked out. I've done it. I haven't done it for a long time.
Maybe it puts them into more of a guard mode and they're looking around for mites and
Possibly.
cleaning more or
Or,
something.
yeah, or bears. Or,
Yeah.
So that's all I've got, but I'm more than welcome to answer any questions or.
I had two questions, probably unrelated to what we covered tonight, as
Not a
I was going through the website for frames and stuff.
Yep.
And so on the Dedant site, they had the frames that you can build. I didn't see it listed anywhere. Do those, or I'm sorry, not frames, boxes.
Oh.
Do the boxes come with frames or is that a separate thing altogether? That is a separate thing.
That is separate. So
Okay.
you can buy boxes that are put together with frames and the frames are put together and the foundation is in there. But yeah, when you buy a box, I think they call it a knockdown. You have to put together.
Okay.
I don't think I've ever seen frames with those.
Okay.
But you should find the same thing on frames. You should be able to buy frames that aren't assembled and put them together yourself.
And then that was kind of leads into my next question. So I saw one of the tools that had wires. Is that I saw some foundations that seems like you just slide them into the grooves, but then some needed to be attached with like a heated wire, is that?
Dean, you want to grab one of those frames, the wooden frames with the plastic foundation? So the wires are for embedding into wax foundation.
Okay,
So instead of the piece of plastic that you'll see in a second, it's actually wax that's been run through a mill and it puts that hexagon shape on both sides,
okay,
but it's weak. You know, compared to plastic, it's really weak. So
okay.
the wires are to keep it from sagging and keep it from bowing and
Oh,
stuff.
okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Show him how the foundation pops out of that and how it goes back
It
in.
just bends a little
Oh,
bit.
okay, it is
Bend it in
that
the center.
then. Okay,
And now that is a bottom groove, top groove frame.
okay.
There are
And yeah,
some that are wedge top.
From what I saw, this was like 225 a piece, and this was not that much.
That I'm not sure of. Some people don't like the plastic foundation, even with wax on it. The bees are reluctant to draw it out. So some people like the wax foundation. That's just so much easier to deal with. I'd rather go with that
Yeah.
than the wax foundation.
And then, yeah, I found some plans online today for like the supers and stuff like that, but I mean, off the bat, I think I'm just gonna go with that, but I do like to do a little woodworking, so I wouldn't
Sure.
mind doing it at some point, but
If you're putting frames together, maybe a few more staples in here or nails than what you have to.
Mhm.
But I do like putting a nail in here. So you can see that's gonna go into the top bar.
Mhm.
And when you're pulling that frame up out of the hive and you're pulling on those ears, that nail going in that way adds a lot of strength. I mean, you glue every joint,
Mhm.
but I think the nail adds a little strength. Most of the
Two
rest of these,
staples in the bottom, 2 in the top, and 2 in the sides.
so there's one staple.
And I
And
put
that's
2
the
in
second
down
one?
there,
Okay. There.
not in the side, but just in the bottom.
Well, so you just put 2 there. Yeah.
And are
See, now
they-
They've done one over here.
So the way they're listed on the website again, they say they sell the nails separate. Are the nails anything special, or are they?
Size-wise, they're kind of convenient. There's bigger ones for here and here and smaller ones for here.
Okay.
I use that.
But if I had a new
The
mat-
frames I got
Yeah,
from Jaden,
I can just,
Yeah,
okay.
I got 2 boxes of 10 of frames to assemble. They came with nails.
Yeah, I was gonna say, most of the time
boxes
when I
did-
got framed.
When I got boxes separate, so I buy a bag of nails.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I like triple coated decking screws for boxes. I put, on the top, I put one going this way and one going this way and the same on the bottom. So ends up being 4 screws on each corner.
And glue.
And glue,
What
yeah,
kind of
glue
glue?
first. I
use
use
Tight
Tight
Bond
bond 2.
Tight Bond
That's
2
what-
or
That's what I would use.
for Elmer's, as long as it's exterior. Yeah, either one is
I know,
I
probably
just
good.
bought 5 Premier's Propola boxes.
Oh, okay.
Like Phil had with the rough inside and stuff.
Roughed up inside.
With those dovetail joints. A drop of glue in each one with a brush and rounded it around and stuck those together. They squared up.
Well, I've got,
Make sure your frames are square if you're putting them together yourself, because if they're not, the foundation's not gonna fit in there, right?
one of those great Porter cable dovetail
Yeah.
things. So
Okay.
I mean, I want to eventually get to that, but I think I'll just buy it the first go around just to make sure I know what I'm doing. But
That's what I did. I bought a box of bomb cars. Here's what I need. So I use that for a prototype. and
Yep.
Oh,
build
yeah.
off of that.
So Amy, you got hives picked out and frames picked out?
I do have a hive
Cool.
and frames,
Cool.
but I actually, don't really know what I have. I think they have to be put together.
Okay.
Cause I actually just opened the box Sunday. I've had it sitting there for a few months. And
Okay.
I just, honestly, after going to his place, I was like, I should look at these and see what this is. And because he's like, I already have mine. I was like, well, I do, but I have no idea
Don't know what I got,
even
but I got
have.
it.
So, yeah, but it had, the tools. It came with, it seemed like everything.
Does it have like the bottom board and the top cover and stuff like that in there, you know? Other than
Like the
just,
very, very top cover?
yeah.
You know what?
Otherwise,
I
if you
don't-
just got the box with the frames in it,
I think
you're
it,
gonna need the other
yeah.
tops and
Yeah,
bottoms. and
yeah,
stuff.
the
It
top and the
looks
bottom.
like, honestly, so I opened up the box and it was, you could clearly tell like each, like all the frames had to be built and the actual hive had to be built, so I don't know. That may not have been part of it, but then there was another box that had like the tools, and I went through all of that, and it had like the tool that we used at your place, and like a brush.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it was a kit probably.
Yeah, probably a kit. It had some nice gloves in there too.
So you'll want to make sure, like Dean says, that you got a bottom board and inner cover and top cover, and then put the boxes together. Make sure you got at least two. Well, if you're getting one package of bees, if you're getting two packages of bees, you need two hives. But yeah, you want to go through and make sure you got enough stuff in there to make a complete hive. And yeah, start putting it together
Yeah.
sooner as opposed to later, because
Yeah,
especially
and
this year, things are early.
Yeah, I don't know if we're gonna do it this spring or just learn about them this spring and
Yep.
do it, or February, I guess. It feels like spring, and then do it next year. Like
Yep.
we have like the area just prepared.
Yeah, no, that some people do it that way. I did it that way. I took the class one
Yeah.
January and then got bees not the following May, but
That's
the
what
May after.
that's what we're kind of just trying to figure out how soon.
We'll have we'll have a couple of more hive inspections, hopefully over at the orchard in South Sioux and hopefully over at my hive, so you can get into some different hives and see them throughout the year, which sometimes helps too, instead of just jumping in on your
Yeah.
own. Yeah.
So when you do the boxes for the hives, I know you talked about that you use mediums. Would you use the same that you use for the supers that you do for the foundation? Would you use mediums for that, or would you use the deeps for the bottom two boxes?
For the brood nest?
Yeah.
I use mediums top to
All the
bottom.
way.
So even
Okay.
my brood nest is mediums. But it's 3 or 4 mediums.
Gotcha. Okay.
Because I'm also using 8 frame equipment instead of 10. So 3 mediums is just a little bit taller than 2 deeps. So if I was using 10 frame mediums, the 3 mediums would be plenty. But since I'm using 8 frame mediums, yeah, it's usually 3 or 4 brood boxes. And it depends on the time of the year. Like right now, they're up in the top. They're 1 medium with a little bit of brood in it.
How many did you go into winter with? 4?
I
3 or 4?
try to go in with 4, but it's almost always 3. I've got
Then you have
one
the
this
issue
year
if
that's
you
4.
buy bees in a nuke, then they're coming in with deep frames.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I looked at the unassembled ones, and you could get like a 10-pack, and I was like, well, is that going overboard, or is that, I
It's
think
a
you'll
little
always
cheaper.
use them. You'll always, I mean, eventually you'll use them, but you might
Yeah.
not use them right away.
And I bought mine by
Yeah.
100.
By the 100? Wow.
Like I bought foundation, I bought 100 sheets, and then I bought 100 frames for me.
I've done.
And eventually
100
use them, right?
frames.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's just,
Yeah, if you've got the place to store them.
yeah.
Where they're protected, yeah, you'll use it eventually. Yeah. I've learned the hard way that you don't want to call Jim down at Dayton's in the middle of the summer and say, can I get
Right.
5 boxes? Because he'll laugh at you.
Yeah.
No, well, yes, you can get 5 boxes 3 weeks from now, or
Right.
2 months from
Yeah,
now.
the truck will be in, every 2-3 weeks or so.
Yeah, I mean, I've literally been a couple of times where I put boxes on, I didn't even have time to paint them because I just put them together and.
Part of the reason I wanted to have plans, just in case, it came to that I had to throw something together.
Yeah.
but-
Yeah, it's good to have at least 1 nuke box, if not 2, and maybe a spare hive or at least some spare boxes, just in case, yeah.
Oh, and then I got the guy, the name I just got, but he's not even a quarter mile down the road, and he's got 2 hives, so if you would ever swarm, and I got the opportunity, I could see if I could get that. but-
Yep, and I make swarm traps. I do put some old frames in them, so I'll take, what would it take, 2x10, 2x12? If you wanted to make a deep, is it 2x10? I don't think is enough, so it's like a 2x12. And run it through a table saw and make a rabbet so that you've got something for the frames to go in. And then the other sides and the top and the bottom, just plywood. Screw them together, put I want to say it's 1.5 inch hole as far as like that's kind of the size opening they prefer towards the bottom. Yeah, I'll put a couple of old frames in there and a few drops of lemongrass oil on a cotton ball that's inside a Ziploc bag. Lemongrass oil smells the same as the location pheromone that the bees will fan. So yeah, I put a bait hive, what we call it. I put one in each bee yard and a few different places. And yeah, you might catch a swarm. I mean,
this guy's, looks like he only has 2 hives and it looks like he's been there for a while, so he might just be happy with just 2 hives, so.
yeah,
Then maybe I got an opportunity, but.
yeah. I've had years where I'll catch 3 swarms and then I'll go 2 years and not catch any.
Mhm.
So it's real hit and miss. I mean, it's worth trying.
Mhm.
I wouldn't use it as my only way of getting bees. I'd buy some bees.
So are those swarms from your other bees? Are they just from somewhere that just found them from?
Dean's laughing. My bees never
Yeah.
swarm because I'm always on top of them. It could be from anywhere. And you don't know
Mhm.
unless you marked the queen
Mhm.
and you catch a swarm and it's marked and it's like, that looks like the mark I put on it. Even then, you wouldn't really know that it was yours unless you're using a weird color,
Mhm.
which some people do. Yeah, you never know.
And if they go in there, they're gonna be honeybees? I mean, they're gonna be,
I mean, wasps might move in there, which if there's a good sized wasp nest in there, the swarm probably won't move in. That's the other thing. The hole is an inch and a half or about that big, and then I always put a couple of nails in it so that mice can't get in it or other birds or birds. Yeah, because a bird nest in it or a mouse nest in it, the swarm's not going to move in. Actually, I've started using hardware cloth over the
I
entrances.
watched a YouTube video like yesterday or the day before, and that's what he said he used.
Yeah, that'll keep the mice and the birds out of it.
I had a swarm trap up in a tree, tied up there with a strap and everything. And I think it was either coons or squirrels got in and tore right in the side of the thing.
No kidding.
Hole in it.
I've had something try to chew through it, so I guess I have seen that. Yeah, squirrels will chew on stuff. Be pretty nasty sometimes. You got locations picked out for your hives, all of you?
I do not.
Do you not?
I have an idea where I'd like it to go, but that doesn't mean it might be the best spot on the
Yeah.
purchase.
That's where I'm at. I got a spot that I think would be good, but then we all started talking about morning sun, and I was like, maybe that wouldn't be the best spot for it, but.
So it doesn't get morning sun, is that your
Well,
concern?
I'm kind of in a bit of a valley anyway,
Okay,
but this would be, so if you kind of consider a saddle.
Yep.
It would be on the western side of the saddle. So eventually we get morning sun, and it would be in a small grove of trees, so it would protect it in the summer, and then it would be 10 feet from 5 acres of pasture, so I would think it would be okay. It wouldn't get the morning sun, but.
yeah, I don't think they have to get morning sun. That's kind of one of the things you'll see in a lot of the books, but I don't know that I've ever seen a study or anything that proves that it gets them up and out early. I don't know.
I wouldn't have any other place that would get morning sun that wouldn't be in the wide out open. So
Okay.
I think I'm gonna try that, but.
And you may be keying off of my preferences a lot, because a lot of beekeepers will tell you, put them in full sun. And that's the best place for them.
Okay.
I like to have some afternoon shade. So, if you took other beekeepers' advice and wide open would be fine. But then you also have to think about winter. So are you going to move them when winter comes?
I was thinking of putting up some wind blocks.
That works
That's
too.
really what I was gonna
Yeah.
do. But
Yeah,
we
that
do,
works too.
so there is a flatter spot a little bit lower. It's just we were planning on planting fruit trees down there, and we don't want the bees right next to the fruit trees, so that when we're dealing with the fruit trees, they're not right next to us, but.
So that might not be as big a concern as you think. I mean, as long as you're not going to trip over them or bump into them when you're pruning the tree,
Mhm.
I don't think I'd worry about it.
Okay.
I mean, I have some hives in my garden in the backyard, and if I'm pulling weeds, when I get within 6 feet of the hives, I have to be more careful or put the hat and veil on. But other than that, other flight path though is an issue, because in my backyard, they end up flying right along the garage, which is also the way I walk into that area. And so I get hit in the face with a bee every now and then and get stung.
Another consideration is maintenance around them, if you're cutting weeds or mowing and things like that.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes you can mow right up to them and then somebody else has the weed trimmer out there and the bees don't like it, or they at least come to the door, or some people get attacked right away because you're making that noise and stuff.
The weed whacker, if it hits whatever the hive is on, that can set them off. I've had that happen to me. Not real bad, but enough that,
I mean, we could leave it in the tall grass. That's not a big deal. I don't know if that would be a big deal with the bees or not, but
I don't think it is. I tend to trim in front of mine a couple of times a year, but they say if you're mating queens, the tall grass helps queens get back without getting picked off by a dragonfly. But yeah, you'll see the brome grass gets tall in front of them, and some of the bees run into it, and sometimes they land on it, and then they go into the hive.
And if you want to work around it, you know, you need
Yeah.
some space so you can
Yeah.
stand there and work, and
yeah.
a couple of feet around it so you can have space.
Yeah, we're still, I mean, we bought this place in August, so we're still trying to figure out the whole thing
I
and,
think that's where we're at. We've been at our place for a few years, but it still feels
yeah,
like
we're like,
we're still working. It just takes years.
well, this is a flat space, we should put a garden here. Well, no, now that's a good place to like have a horse arena kind of a thing, and you know, and then it's
Where's
just
that
like,
with the chickens?
well, that's another thing, and it's like, oh, man, well, we wanna put fruit trees. Well, now we have to take down some of these scrubby trees in order to put the fruit trees up.
Sure.
But then where do the bees go?
It's like it's harder when you have a blank slate.
Exactly.
You know, you don't want to make the wrong decision and put something in the wrong place.
Mhm.
If you only had a couple of places to choose from, it'd be easy. You just
True.
put it in this one, not that one.
Mhm.
I did want to mention when you talk about the land is kind of a bowl or a saddle, you may not want to put them in the bottom of an area like that because cold settles. Same reason you don't want to plant your apple trees there.
Yep.
So
Nope, that's where the horses in the shed is, that's where they winter, so.
Yep.
Anywhere near that, so.
What about a compost pile? Is that fine, good, bad? Because I do have that out there, like kind of in the same.
shouldn't make a difference. Yep, shouldn't make a difference.
It might attract them.
Well,
Some,
that's-
depending.
With my compost, you know, every so when you're throwing fruits and vegetables out at it, then the bees get in it kind of right away, but that's where they're going, you know, they're going to hive and right there and back and forth. It isn't like they bother it, they're just trying to get something sweet out of there.
Everything goes in there. I mean,
Everything.
that type of stuff goes to the chickens more now, but like the goat poop, everything goes into there.
Okay. Let the chickens eat it first, and then what's
Yeah, then
left and
we
what comes out goes into
Put
the
it, and then we use
compost.
that in the garden and.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What other concerns do you have as far as where you're putting them? Just don't know where to do it, or?
Mine was, no windbreaks, like currently, we have plans on doing trees, but right now, there's really not much, so that's a concern. So we could build like a windbreak, like you
Yeah.
talked about.
4x8 sheet of plywood
Yep.
on
Just in the
2 fence
winter.
posts
Yeah.
makes it good.
So that, but then also just basically laying out our plans, like where we
Sure.
have things, like we have a cattle shed out there and we hope, like this or 2 years ago when my daughter graduated, we had a graduation party out there, and then I'll have another one this year, because I have one graduating, so my husband said, we should put it back behind that. I'm like, yeah, but we actually use that, like there's lights up there and it's like
Yeah.
like it's so I'm like, I think it should go on towards the west side of our property, but the south side, not the north side, like, so it's
Yeah,
just
I was
that
gonna say
stuff,
that-
like where we hang, where.
The cattle shed, I was gonna say, would be good if it could work as like a windbreak, but yeah, if you're
It could.
socializing inside of it,
Because
that
it's
might
like
not be
cattle
good.
shed and then here's our barn, so we are always in this area.
Yeah.
But then in the next corner, there's nothing, like that's where our gardens and everything will be. So, that's really what the holdup is just,
Sure.
yeah. And if it was at the front of the property, that's where the house is, and more of the kids play.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But
yeah.
they'd be closer to like the river.
Well, you got a swimming pool across the road too, isn't there?
Yes.
Oh,
They
Kaiser's
a lot
have a
closer
pool.
than the river.
Ugh. Is that bad for them or bad for the owner?
That's bad for the owner of
Kaiser?
the swimming pool.
Rhonda?
Yeah, you'll want to put a water source real close to the hives and
Okay.
keep it full.
Mhm,
A rain barrel with a float for a tank.
mhm,
So rain barrel, run a hose to a float and then put a Rubbermaid tub or something. That works really good.
mhm.
Get a couple of rains and it'll keep your water source full all year long. Gets a little bit stinky, but the bees find it better that way.
Yeah,
That works good.
yeah.
What about you, Kyle? You got spots picked out?
I have a few candidates and they're all within 20 feet because my backyard's not real big.
Yeah.
They're not getting any morning sun back there, but
Are you
they,
in town
I'm
though,
in
or in the
town.
country?
I'm on the edge of town.
Edge of town.
So I don't have any neighbors in the back.
Yeah, sometimes you can't.
I don't know, like, I know where we're at, they're gonna start building their new development, so I say, like, I feel like the town's like
You're
gonna.
gonna build up there?
What?
You're gonna build up by you?
Yeah, by, like where Rhonda is,
Yeah.
like, you know where the Galen, the baseball diamonds are? Like, right behind
Oh,
that,
that, yeah, they said that.
yeah, they're putting up 110 houses.
Oh, well.
Sorry, I didn't mean to.
Like, we got cattle pasture all around us, so I can go anywhere.
Yeah.
I got one spot I can put them right between some apricot bushes.
Yeah.
Some other ones are, that'd be west facing if I put them that way. And the house is right there, so can get warm.
Yeah.
That might get toasty because there's a big concrete face there in the basement. It gets pretty hot there in the summer.
Oh, I was gonna say, what side of the house?
West.
West side. Yeah, so at night, the sun bounces off of that side of the house, can get pretty warm, you're right.
West, I'd probably go a little farther out by, I got a row running east and west of pine trees. From there.
Sure.
That was my initial thought.
And sometimes, a 6-foot picket fence in like a corner can kind of serve as a windbreak and hide them from the neighbors and kind of just keep people from walking right up to them. And then the bees have to fly over that. So gets them out of people's light path.
Would a fence of some sort like that even encourage them to head the way that you prefer versus over, like,
I've
if you want to
wondered
stop them
about
from
that.
going to the fields that are sprayed or something like that, or not?
I don't know, and I was asking Judy Boo Smart, or wanted to ask her because she said something in one of her talks that made me think that they might have a tendency to, I can't remember what she said. It was either they go out the entrance and, if the entrance is facing south, they have a tendency to fly south. If the entrance is
Okay.
facing west, I don't know if that's what she was getting at, but I wondered about that too, because I had some at an organic garden one time, and there were a lot of trees in between the hives and the gardens. And I see the bees coming out of the entrance and going the other way, and I'm thinking, are 50% of them going up and over the trees or through the trees, or are they all
I
just
think so.
ignoring the garden? I think so too, but I don't know, and I don't know that I've ever seen a study that looked at it.
When you get the bees coming back and doing their waggle dances, who knows which direction they're sending their
Yeah.
helpers out to.
If you put the bees in the middle of a field of clover, let's say, and you put an 8-foot tall fence on two sides of them, and there's just as much clover where they don't have to fly over the fence, or let's say even a clump of trees, why would they go over the trees or the fence when they can just fly straight out to the clover? So, if there's abundant resources out one direction, they're probably going to go whichever way is easiest. But most of the time, they're kind of struggling and searching, and if there's something on the other side of that clump of trees that's good, they will go there. That's my opinion.
Maybe back to the wintering thing. If I have several hives, or at least 2, maybe 3, close together, in the winter, could I just put 4 posts on the outside of all of those hives and then put up some like pole barn sheet metal in between them? Would that be enough of a windbreak? Maybe keep a gap top and bottom to let the air circulate, but
So, any kind of windbreak helps. If you completely enclosed them, you need to make sure that they can get out when they have a warm day and take a cleansing flight, and that they can find their way back in.
Okay.
So like people talk about putting them in a shed. Well, if there's like one open window in the shed, they'll find their way out, but for some reason they don't always find their way back in or don't find their hive when they come back in. So I tell people if you're going to put them or build something for them, make it a three-sided shed. So there's one side that's completely open and you'll face the entrances out that way, so they'll fly right out the entrance and out the shed, and the bees don't even know they're in an enclosure.
Because I've just seen a lot of people, my wife included, saying, oh, just put straw around them. Well, then that attracts mice and rodents and things like that. So
Yeah.
trying to avoid that
Yeah.
if at all possible.
Yeah, because mice in beehives are
Mice
nasty.
in general are nasty,
Yeah.
and we have them. We have,
In the
oh,
country.
what?
We're in the country, you're gonna have
I know,
mice.
but there's,
Some
okay,
bats.
there's actually one or two in the house right now, in the basement, and I'm like, what the heck? We even have a cat, and we have outdoor cats, we have an indoor cat, but I mean, and the house is sealed up, but not 100% because
Yeah, it
we're
doesn't
still
take
built, like,
much,
we're redoing it, and there's like,
Sure.
you know?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, my garage is, I don't think I could keep the mice out, so I just have to constantly keep half a dozen or a dozen mouse traps set.
mm,
And it'll go months and nothing. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, there's a whole bunch of dead mice. You gotta clean them out and reset them, and then it'll go months again and nothing. But they really like beehives, and they really make a mess in them. And the bees don't like the equipment afterward.
I think if you guys got extra questions, Land Beekeeper Club, if you can come to some of those meetings, there's always information on that. And call us or something. Here's my card for you guys too with my number. My wife's, if you want something, call and we can answer questions or come visit and things like that.
So did you all get on the Siouxland Beekeepers email group?
I don't know, what did we have to do that?
Okay, I'll email you again.
That was Dan, right?
That was Dan. Yeah, so if you get on the email group,
Oh,
then was either we're doing something here in Sioux City or Sioux Center, you'll get a notice. So like if we do another hive inspection, I'll also try and email just this class for a while on things like that. But eventually I stop remembering to forward things. You're probably on the club email anyway.